Lesson 5.4, multiplying polynomials special products. This is day 2 of our multiplying with polynomials. Most of this is binomial times binomial, as there are some binomial time binomials that have special patterns to them. And when you recognize them, you can do the work a lot faster. And actually these patterns will continue to appear throughout the rest of the year from time to time. So we're going to take a look at these patterns now and start studying them now. So that way as they reappear later in the year, you've got an idea of what you're looking at and you can study the patterns. And that's essentially what our algebra is the study of patterns. So we have 3 different things that we're going to look at. We're going to have what we call the square of a binomial, and there's 2 parts to that. The square of a binomial is when you have like x plus 2 squared, or you have like x minus 4 squared. That would be 2 parts. A second part of a type of a pattern that we're going to look at is what we call the product of a sum and a difference. So like here I have x plus 5 times x minus 5, or 4x plus 2y times 4x minus 2y. So let's go back. Square of a binomial. So I have x plus 2 squared. When you have x plus 2 squared, that is the same thing as rewriting it as x plus 2 times x plus 2. That is what x plus 2 squared tells us to do. When I distribute, and if I use my distributing, I'll do x times x, and that is x squared. Then I do x times 2x, so I have plus 2x. And then I have 2 times x plus 2x, and 2 times 2, that's 4, so plus 4. Okay, a pattern to notice that with the square of binomials, if you look here in the middle of this polynomial here after I've done my distributing, notice I have a plus 2x and a plus 2x. I have the same term twice. It has appeared 2 times right here. I also want you to note that the first term here, x, that is the square of the first term in this binomial. Our last term, 4, is the square of this 2 over here. So when I simplify this, I'm going to get an answer then that says x squared plus 4x, when I put the 2 like terms together, and then plus 4. So what you have then is, when you have a square of a binomial, and you have x plus 2 squared, x plus 3 squared, you'll have a pattern. If you were to look in your textbook, it will show you a purple diagram, and inside that purple diagram it shows you this. It says if you have a plus b, and it's squared, you will always get an answer that says this, that the answer is going to be the first term squared plus 2 of a times b plus the last term b squared. So looking back and studying this here, I have first term squared. There were 2 of those 2 x's. That gave me 4x. And then I have the last term 4 squared in my answer. So let's look at another, x plus 7 squared. All right, if I have this, I now have x plus 7 times x plus 7. Trying to use this pattern up here. I do x times x, that gives me x squared. Now I have 2 of a times b. Notice here I would have, if I was to actually write this out the long way, I would be doing an x times a 7, and then a 7 times x. So I'm doing the same thing twice. So when I see this up here as x plus 7 squared, I will take x times 7, that's 7x, and I need 2 of them, so that will be 14x. Then lastly, I will have my last one says take b, the 7, and square it. 7 squared is 49. So notice I now have a trinomial. I have the first term squared. I have the last term squared. You multiply the 2 terms and double them to get the middle term. Our sign is always going to be plus, plus, and that's because I have a plus on the inside of the binomial here. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me at any time. All right, now I'm going to move on to what does it do when there's a minus on the inside. So let's, if I write this out, then I say this is like x minus 4 times x minus 4. And I will distribute here. And let's take a look at our pattern for this. So I have x times x, that gives me x squared. And then I'm going to do an x times a minus 4. And then I'm going to do minus 4 times x for another minus 4. So notice I now have two of the same term in the middle again. And then I have a negative 4 times negative 4 for a plus 16. So now I simplify the middle. I say x squared minus 8x plus 16. I'm just going to make another x there. So what pattern does this follow? Well, it's very similar to when it says has a plus sign in the middle. The difference being in my middle answer here, my middle term, instead of it being a plus here, it's now a minus. So if you were to look again in the textbook, it would be another inside a purple bubble would it be something like this, that you have a minus b squared. And the answer to that will always follow this pattern, that the first term a will be squared. So I add x times x, that's x squared. Then you have 2 of a times b. And notice here we did 4x times minus 4, and that appears twice. Minus 4x minus 4x. And when you add those together, you get 8x. So if I do negative 4 times x times 2 gives me a minus 8x. It will follow this pattern right here. And then lastly, you will have a plus b squared, or the last term squared. And if I do 4 times 4, negative 4 times negative 4, I beg your pardon, that will give me positive 16, which I have right here at the end. So now let's try to use that pattern with this 2y minus 3 squared. My answer will be the first term squared, 2y times 2y. That answer is going to be 4y squared. So I'm trying to do that in my head. Now 2y times 2y, 4y squared. I want to follow my pattern. Minus 2 of a times b. So I have a 2y times b, negative 3. That's negative 6y. I need two of those, so I'll double it. Negative 6y doubled will be negative 12y. And lastly, take my last term, the minus 3, and square it. Negative 3 times negative 3 plus 9. So now I have my final answer of 4y squared minus 12y plus 9. The only difference between these two patterns is that the middle term, when I have a minus sign in here, middle term's a minus. When I have a plus sign, middle term's a plus. Now, if the shortcut, if you're not quite sure how to use it, go ahead and use the distributing like I did, and eventually you will see the pattern, how it works, that you'll see two of these here happens every time. And we're going to take first term and square it. We're going to take the middle, the both terms, multiply them together and double it to get my middle term, and then we square the last term to get our last term of our trinomial. And if you don't quite get the pattern right away, keep using the distributive. You will eventually get it. All right. Now we have the product of a sum and a difference. And this is an interesting situation that you have inside the binomials, you have the exact same numbers and variables. The difference being one has a plus, the other one has a minus. Watch as I multiply this out, and I'll show you how this pattern works. So I'm going to distribute x times x, x squared. X times minus 5, minus 5x. 5 times an x, plus 5x. 5 times minus 5 is a negative 25. So again, now in the middle of this is important. Just like we were working with the square of binomials for a product of a sum and a difference, what I'd like you to notice here, minus 5x and plus 5x. What do you know about those? Those are opposites. So as I write my final answer here, I have x squared. And when these are opposites, they cancel. So it disappears. And I'll write down the minus 25. So what becomes our pattern then? Well, this is what you would see in a purple bubble in your book. I would have that A plus B times A minus B. And what happens is the final answer is always this, that you will always have A squared minus B squared. Anytime you have the product of a sum and a difference, you can take the first term, you can square it and write it down. You can take the last term and square it and write it down, and we put a minus sign in between, just like what happened up here. I have x squared minus 25. So let's try and use that shortcut on this one over here that says 4x plus 2y and times 4x minus 2y. So if I use that shortcut, 4x times 4x, 16x squared. Now I know the middle terms will cancel, so I don't need to do that multiplying there because this is the pattern of a product of a sum and a difference. It's a guarantee. And now square the last terms. I will have a minus 2 times 2 is 4, so it's 4y squared. 4y squared. 16x squared minus 4y squared. Again, if you have a little trouble seeing the pattern right away, use your distributing, and then you'll be able to get the correct answer. Either way, it works. But I would hope that you'll be able to work with this pattern, see if you can get it down. It'll help you a lot. Lastly, I have one other type of example to show you here. When do you do when there's 3 factors? When there's 3 factors, we're going to do 2 at a time. I will do these 2 binomials times one another, and then I'll take that answer times the last binomial. All right, looking here, I have x minus 4 times x plus 4. Do you recognize something? Yes, this is the product of a sum and a difference. Product of a sum and a difference. We have the sum of x plus 4 and the difference of x minus 4. So if I use my shortcut, I use my pattern, I know that the answer when I multiply these 2 binomials is going to be x squared, because I can square the first term. My middle term, the negative 4x and plus 4x cancel. And I'm going to then take negative 4 times 4, and I'm going to go minus 16. So I've now multiplied the first 2 binomials, copy the next binomial. Now I will do binomial times binomial again. Once in a while you get lucky like this one where I have product of a sum and a difference again. So I'm just going to repeat the shortcut pattern. X squared times x squared, x to the 4th. Add your exponents. Now I'll do negative 16 times positive 16. I'm not going to worry about the middle term because in this case I'll end up with a negative 16x here and a positive 16x squared. They cancel. So negative 16 times positive 16 will be a minus 256. And that will be the final answer like that. So again, when you get 3 factors, do 2 of the binomials, multiply together first, copy, now multiply the others. If there's patterns like I have in this one, feel free to use the patterns. If you need to write out your distributing, write that out. So then the next question is what do I want you to practice? I want you to practice for all 3 types. Now from page 289, for a positive square of a binomial, you're going to do these 6 problems, please. For a subtracting one, I want you to do these 4 problems. And then for the product of the sum and a difference, I want you to do these 8 problems. So take some time to stop the video or when it ends, but be sure that you write this down. I do want you to do these problems in the order you see them on the screen. Start with doing all the positive ones first, then do the subtracting square of a binomial, followed lastly by doing the product of a sum and a difference. If you do them that way instead of the numerical problem order, if you do them in this way, you'll have a better chance of being able to start getting familiar with the pattern that you see. Okay, thank you. Let me know if there's anything I can help you with on that assignment.